Hi everyone, it's Wim Gerrits from netYCE. In this video, I really like to give you a high-level overview of what netYCE is all about. Before going into in-depth demos and stuff, I'd like to touch upon all the main things. I'll show the application, but I'll also give you the reasoning behind why we have developed the netYCE platform as we did. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. Let's get started. Alright, so first of all, let me explain the name of the company and also the name of the platform. It's called netYCE. So YCE, it stands for Your Configuration Engine. So it's really about configuring the network and having centralized control across all network configuration changes. That's really what netYCE is all about. Now, Gartner selected netYCE as cool vendor because of the fact that we've been simplifying network automation to make it easy for any network engineers to drive automation through your infrastructure. So it doesn't surprise you that for us, we think of the network in terms of how it is configured or how it gets configured. So is it reflecting the way you intended it to be? And this can be quite challenging. If you take a look at the processes around design, build, and operating networks, you'll see that many people use different tools from Visio and Excel, Notepad, what have you, but also nowadays with scripts and Ansible playbooks. The challenge is like, how do you manage these processes? How do you prevent in the end that you are not sure what the network state is? So do you really know how your network is configured nowadays? If you don't, then that's a risk for the stability, security, and of course the agility of your network. Now, if I need to sum up what netYCE is, it's really an enterprise platform to deal with all of that in a structured and manageable way. If you standardize on these processes, you're getting a more stable, secure, and agile network. Now, as I said, it's an enterprise platform. Now, what does that mean? It means that out of the box, it comes with all of the tools and capabilities that you need to run your network automation as a company, because there's many aspects to being successful with network automation, and we've implemented them in the platform. Now, it's not an application. What we mean by that, it's fully flexible, it is easy to manage and scalable, but especially the flexibility. We don't want to tell any network engineer or DevOps engineer on how he should configure the automation logic and processes. That is really agnostic. It's vendor agnostic, it's syntax agnostic, but you don't need to worry about the underlying platform. So we take care of it. We provide you updates and maintenance or new features. But in the end, it's a Swiss Army knife that allows your network engineering team to automate the network how you prefer it. Now, on a high level, there are 4 steps that we always go through. And I would say this is our methodology. But not only that, it reflects the 4 solutions within the netYCE platform. So we have config management that allows you to track any change in the network. We have network compliance that allows you to find any issue or misconfiguration in the network that gets validated by any policy or rule that you like. Then third, once you know that you're not compliant with certain things, you can start fixing it with network automation, or you can drive day-to-day automation as much as you like. Finally, you want to take it to the highest level, which we call intent-based networking. So you can drive standardization through design modeling and these kind of things. So let's show you those 4 pillars in the netYCE application. And I'll start off with the first 2 because track and find, they typically run in the background all the time. You don't need to worry about them once they've been set up. They will alert you once any deviation from your design standards will pop up, or when a change is made that doesn't reflect those changes. So let's take a look at those 2 first. We're going to start here. You can configure, of course, the polling groups. Once a day, netYCE goes and fetch them, but you can also make netYCE a proactive syslog server. So whenever there's a change made outside of netYCE control, we get a notification and we'll get all of the configuration backed up. Now you can see on this specific device, over time, the netYCE system has backed up 140 different configurations. Now let's take a look at how we have organized them. You see there's dates on year and month, and then within the month there are dates. So you can see that on this specific date, This was the full configuration file of that device. It's still a small one, but they can go up to 500,000 lines of code if you like, for firewalls and load balancers and stuff like that. But you can also, of course, compare them. So we keep track of all the timestamps. Now you can see that between this time and that time, there was a VLAN change made. So first of all, it's easy for operations team to troubleshoot why a certain error occurred, because you can take a look at what the changes were in that time period. But for netYCE, it's mainly to deal with the compliance. We're now in the compliance section. You can see there's a whole library of policies, and every policy has a rule, and each rule has its own logic on what it needs to comply with. Now, before I dive into the specifics, let's give you a high-level overview and understanding on the different types of policies and rules that we can put into the netYCE system. Now, there are 5 drivers. The first one that out of the box comes with netYCE is the hardening. It's basically the recommended vendor hardening that is officially documented by Cisco and Juniper and all the vendors in CIS. You go to their website, you can download the PDFs, but we've turned them into digitized rules. Secondly, there are the CVEs, which are also known as the common vulnerabilities and exposures. Also, the vendors will publish these risks that you need to check whether you are liable in your infrastructure. Then, of course, there are regulatory rules, but also your own company design rules and maybe advanced monitoring checks that you want to validate against. So let's quickly go and take a look at maybe 2 or 3 of them. Let's filter on CIS. So as I said, out of the box, these come with netYCE. So you can see how should a password be encrypted, how should a banner be set up, how should SSH be configured, and is it configured? So you can see that in this case it's for Cisco, but we support all the major vendors in here. You can see we can validate against the configuration file or against a show command output. So let's take a look at this. So here you can type any show command. In this case we want to see show IP SSH, whether this meets the rule. It must contain, or it must not contain, but in this case it must contain these values. Now I hope you get the gist of this. You can do the same for, let's say, CVEs, where, let's take a look at one. So here's a Cisco vulnerability, and I got the website here open. This should be configured in such a way that if you have these lines in your configuration, you're fine. You're covered for that vulnerability. So again, the way this is set up, you create a policy, or we do that for you as a service. You can check on the command or on the configuration file output. Let's take a look at the show command. In this case, it must contain those 2 lines that I just showed you. So what will happen? Actually, there are automatic reports running, but in the end, you will get these kind of reports automatically generated, sent to you by email, tickets being created if they occur on a daily basis. But it shows you, so the columns are, in this case, a couple of routers, but you get an overview of all the minor and major risks that your network is not compliant with. Now this is nice for hardening, but you want to do the same for maybe your own design checks. So you can basically create policies and rules of anything you like, that you can think of as an engineer, and it will run in the background and notify you. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now let's go to the last 2 pillars, because really this is what the platform is all about. It's about automation and intent-based networking. Now, before I can show you this, I'd like to explain how the platform is conceptually architected. So, as I said, for netYCE, it doesn't matter if you want to automate using CLI, API, whether you want to do JSON calls on an element or management system using Ansible, Python. So how come we are so flexible? Well, if you look at the core of the netYCE engine, as I said, YCE, your configuration engine, we're able to pull things together. So we have data that can come from clicking around in the UI or sending an API call or actually looking at the inventory, which I'll show you in a minute. But it merges data with templates that can be CLI template, Ansible templates. We don't care, but we merge them together. We create a configuration from it. And in this case, it's a config create, and we push out a job to the network. Now those two on the left, backup and validate, I just showed you already. But the config create or the config delete or an update on the configuration can be managed by these templates and data. So then we have a job queue, which can be approval mechanisms, etc., etc. But we also have something called scenarios, which is really the detailed logic on how you want an execution in your network to be done. So we call this workflows or deployment workflows. And let's take a look at those four initially, and then I'll explain how on top of that we have our own intent-based functionality to make it even nicer. Okay, so let's take a look. Now let's start off here under the operate section. There are all the automation tools. Let's start with a command job. So I'm in this page called push command jobs, and I've just added just a few of them here, a few network nodes. But you see here we can type commands, but I can also call upon something we call the template. So between those brackets, this is a template for creating an API VLAN. I'll show you the example in a minute, but here you can see which scenario this job is using. And there's a whole library of jobs that in this case this operator has made. But out of the box it is a default command job. So you can see there is a different scenario. It will use a different task to be executed. We'll show you that in a minute. But here I could actually type anything I like, select all the devices and just push it out. But that's not really a manageable way to do it. So let's go back to our example here. And let's show you the different concepts here that I explained. So let's go first to the template. So here in the template section, you can see that we have a API VLAN. And if I open this up, you can see that in this case, this operator has used the, I think it's JSON syntax to manage the code in a way that now we can input variables automatically if we generate the command job. So let's go back to the command job. In this case, the parameter here is a very simple one, 345. And if I basically would select this node, and before pushing it, I can evaluate it. It would actually merge together, let's say, the template with the data. A simple case, but I hope you understand the concept behind it. Now this data, or a whole bunch of data, could also come in through the API, or it can come from the netYCE database. Right? So let's go back quickly. I showed you it's using a scenario called API job. Now let's go to the scenarios section. So here also on the operate scenarios, there's a whole bunch of scenarios. Now there's the basic command job, and there was the one we just used. So here you can really specify which engine we should talk to, which commands we should use, if we should abort when something goes wrong, whether we should update something maybe to your Slack channel when the job goes wrong or succeeds. Basically, you can think of anything and it can be scripted in an easy way. Now, the beauty of the netYCE syntax here is that we have already created a whole bunch of plugins. So now you can actually call upon even an Ansible server, create a YAML file and push out a job to something outside of netYCE. We can maybe create, look at a config diff first, do some logic behind it, and if there is a diff, then maybe do something differently. We do a rollback or whatever you want. So think of this as a very flexible way to manage all your logic on how you want the execution on certain types of jobs to be done. Okay, so let's go back to our job here, and let's say I have selected my job, I've looked at it, I trust it, I'm going to schedule it. So it's now in my scheduler, and let's go to a website that it's talking to. So as a demo, I've basically pushing an API call to this site, and there it is. Right, so I hope you get the whole gist of this. This can be a CLI device, this can be a cloud system, this can be anything you like, but you've configured it in such a way that you now know how the process goes. Not even that, also netYCE creates API calls of everything we do. So I just created this API call, and I can also copy the API call that netYCE created and send it over to my developers team and say, why don't you basically call upon netYCE whenever you want to create a VLAN or to delete a VLAN. So this is the way that netYCE can help you out on integrating this with your portals. Okay, so we've touched upon those 4 blocks here. Now let's take a look at the final step, the intent-based stuff. What it basically means, if you remember that we had to put in data or send data to the API, now this data can be not structured or not reflecting your logic, or you don't want to deal with Excel sheets and IP addresses on how to assign different VLAN numbers. So we can actually create design models of your nodes, your services. Basically your low-level design rules we can translate into something abstract called design models. And by executing them, we will update our inventory and actually update the service. So now we can also create the data for you automatically. And let's take a look at one example. To do that, let's go to the inventory of netYCE. As you can see, it's multi-tenant. So in this case, we go for a campus network. And on a certain location, let's say I want to create a full new configuration for a new edge device. Now you'll see something popping up which has been configured already by a designer on the design option here. But it shows me the option as an operator to add maybe another 4 edge devices before reaching the limit. Okay, so do this, and by hitting the start button, the netYCE database gets automatically updated in 20 steps. So I'm not going to show you in detail what happens, but basically these are your low-level steps that as an engineer or network architect you have defined. Like, I'm going to create a new node, I'm going to link it to this port on the distribution, I'm going to use this IP address, this VLAN number, this is the naming convention, and netYCE will actually have populated everything automatically. So let's go back to my inventory, and you'll see that there is a new edge device here, number 3, that is automatically created. It's still in plan mode in my database, so the service has been populated automatically. But not only that, I can go and take a look at the full configuration that is now automatically created. To go to my campus network, here is my new edge device number 3, and now I can see that this is not a backup configuration, but it's dynamically generated as we speak from the data that was updated in the database. Now this can be sent to an engineer locally, or ideally there is an integrated DHCP server with netYCE. So if you configure it the right way, netYCE can be a full zero-touch provisioning system for your network devices. Alright, let's leave it with that for now. I hope you can see that it allows you to build endless number of use cases. We've done this for enterprise networks, for service provider networks, or for managed service providers that manage third-party networks. Now, if you like this, I hope you're going to try out for yourself. We offer something called a startup package. There's no long-term commitment. In a 2-month period, we'll give you the full netYCE appliance. Either install it locally on your premise, or you can run it from a private cloud. But we can go through all these 4 pillars in workshops and give you real deliverables that are hopefully very valuable to you. So we'll come up with an audit report, we'll build use cases to mitigate any risk we find, and we can build specific use cases that represent your situation. All right, I hope this was useful. If you want to have a detailed demo, just click on one of the links below and book a meeting with one of my engineers. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.